You qualified for the World Cup, but really, if we're honest, against a backdrop of boredom, apathy, that night you qualified for the World Cup, how did you feel?
Very flat. I think we, as a group of staff, weren't particularly happy with the way that we'd played. We knew that there was still this disconnect with the fans. When I joined the FA to work with the under-21s, I'd wanted to implement a style of play that showed what young English players were capable of. We'd had some success at junior level with the junior teams. That had gained momentum for everybody at St George's. The unknown was, would those young players be able to adapt, and would the likes of the older players that came in but were playing for the first time, Trippier, Maguire, Pickford, how would they cope with international football? Because I've often said it's not just the level of the opponent, it's can you handle wearing the shirt and playing for England.
Your time at Borough, did that help you or hinder you, do you think? I mean, you actually had 2 good years, but you leave and people look back on it and say, with respect, the guy who got Middlesbrough relegated.
Yeah, for a few years that is the stigma that you're left with. The reality of that is, how can you possibly walk off the field one minute and be the finished article as a manager the next? When I was playing, I was still learning at 35, 14 years on, 15 years on. In my view, going from playing there to managing, compared to going from managing the under-21s to the England seniors, was much harder. And to finish 12th and 13th in my first year, knowing that as little as I did, really, was as big an achievement as getting England to a World Cup semi-final.
You seemed quite cautious about becoming England manager, but then in the role you've been really bold. How do those two things fit together in your character?
Yeah, I have a tendency to overthink things, or certainly I did. I was probably scarred by getting the sack at Middlesbrough, and I think I didn't like the idea that, you know, having supported Roy leaving and then I'm moving into that seat didn't sit comfortably with me. And I didn't think there'd be a lot of enthusiasm at that time for an internal appointment. You know, when England don't do so well in a tournament, there's always a nailing of the FA and move on. So, but then when Sam came and went so quickly, somebody had to step in a short notice, and I knew I was best placed to take the games that were 4 days away. And we won a couple of games, and I think the public thought, well, okay, we've tried everything else, we might as well. There's some logic to giving a bloke that took the youth teams. Germany did it, you know, let's give it a go. I don't think there was any more enthusiasm than that for it.
I can barely remember the days when you weren't the country's most popular man. but how have you, I don't know, what has your perspective been on just seeing how people view you totally shift and becoming really popular?
Yeah, it's bizarre, really, having had people shout out of vans at me for about 15 years since I missed the penalty. It is, yeah, complete shift. People come up to you, they talk about not the results, but the summer that they had, and how they feel about the team. And that's been fascinating for me, because you immediately assume as a manager it's all about the win. But I think with the national team it's about so much more than that. The biggest thing in my life, bar family, was always England, and I'm hugely patriotic, so there's no other job that could mean as much, and that having success within it could mean as much, because I know it affects so many other things, you know. At a time when, you know, the country's wrestling with its identity, with Brexit, with a lot of negativity, we've had a year where people have found some solace and some hope and some enjoyment, and football's entertainment.
Do you really struggle with what's gone on politically and in the country? Does that occupy your mind a lot, what's happened this year?
It does, because I'm English, so it affects me. I think, first and foremost, I think the Prime Minister has got an impossible job. You know, as a manager, sometimes you have a hand of cards, and you might have a really strong hand or a really weak hand, and she's got an appalling hand. I have to say, given that the two jobs have been sort of linked in terms of how difficult they are. For sure, she's welcome to hers at the moment.